Everyone? We're here live on the West Coast, Pacific time, 8:17 p.m. because we're doing the West Coast Conference from the Pump Fake Pod. We got Elliot Money in the studio. Elliot, my friend, how the hell are we, dude?
Doing good, man. Wednesday is over, so on the downhill slide to the weekend, I guess. I got a work trip this weekend, so I won't be enjoying the weekend as much as some other people. But I'm happy for everybody. It's Wednesday, 2 more work days, and then also another day closer to November 4th.
That is true indeed. November 4th is upon us. Big preview show for the Pump Fake Pod. Thanks to everyone for tuning in, those that are listening. We are the Pump Fake Pod. Make sure to like and subscribe. Tell your friends for all things college basketball. This is our 26th conference preview, locking in number 26. I can't believe it. Elliot mentioned the November 3rd or November 4th era because on November 3rd, Sunday night, it's the night before Christmas. We're doing our first live betting show. And man, we were volume shooting last year, doing tons of bets. So I'm super pumped up to get that going. May kind of ease into it more this year, but I'm still going to do some volume. We all ended up massive amount of units last season. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. Next week, P5 episodes for conference previews, all P5 starting tomorrow with Big East. And then also next week will be the futures episode, futures episodes, and maybe a sneak preview also into a new segment potentially. So, well, stay tuned, everyone. But this is the West Coast Conference, WCCC. They started the bracket. They were the originators of those massive brackets in their conference tournament. And we always know it's Gonzaga and St. Mary's, but there's always those darlings we love. Not St. Francis, St. Mary's, or not St. Mary's either. San Francisco, Santa Clara. And I love Pepperdine, man. Pepperdine's my jam. For those that listened last year, Zoey 101 is the nickname for Pepperdine because that's where they filmed it. So we're going to call them Zoey 101 for sure this season. But I love the West Coast Conference. Good competitive play, a lot of offense, fun to watch at 11, 12 p.m., whatever time. Elliot, what you think about the West Coast Conference?
Yeah, one new addition here in the West Coast Conference with Seattle coming in from the WAC this year. So now they've kind of got that good number of 12. I always like an even number when it comes to conferences. They were kind of been stuck at 11 for a while, but now they're at 12 with the addition of Seattle. And then just for this season, because Oregon State and Washington State head back to the Pac-12 after a 2-year stint here in the West Coast Conference. And the big shocker, Gonzaga leaving the West Coast Conference for the Pac-12 next year as well. So kind of the last year for the West Coast Conference as we've known it. And Seattle's kind of riding on the coattails here with this 1 year in the kind of original West Coast Conference with the addition of the 2 Pac-2 schools.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, yeah, Seattle coming in. It's kind of like everyone taking that stepping stone into the Pac-12 next year. We've kind of mentioned some conferences merging, consolidating, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really feel like there's a lot of synergy, but with this one, it does. There is a stepping stone, and Gonzaga was destined for the Pac-12 and basketball. So that'll be very fun to see. But hey, West Coast Conference, all these previews for those that are listening, we go alphabetically, and then we give our top standings 1 through 12. So we're going to dive in here first to the West Coast Conference immediately. Gonzaga, the powerhouse, didn't win the regular season though last year, finishing 26-9 out of Spokane, Washington, 14-4 in the West Coast Conference. One returning starter and Mark Few, 741 and 152, 26 years, few DUIs along the way as well. But Mark Few, solid coach and definitely a legend. And Gonzaga, a good program, but another new look. But they've always been able to bring in talent, get top recruits. It's never been an issue for Gonzaga to be competitive in this conference, to say the least. Even with the additions and taking that step into the Pac-12, you still got Graham Ike. We've mentioned him from the Wyoming. He can be an absolute unit for Mark Few again, and taking that next step like we saw last year. I think his first year was timid more on Gonzaga, and that second year last year was just icing on the cake for Ek. So yeah, great career. I love Gonzaga. How can you not? They're the favorites in this conference always. They definitely did well in the transfer portal, I would say, as well, Elliot. If you want to touch on some transfers coming in, and then it's always a tough place to play as well. So the most talent on this roster, especially with a lot of pieces leaving and a couple other teams that we'll mention, but definitely the most talent in this conference in the West Coast. So I like Gonzaga. They're always a favorite, and they should be as for sure this year.
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to a couple former Zags, Chet Holmgren and Andrew Nimhard, facing off there in the NBA Finals on the big scale there back in June of this year. So just kind of speak to the program of the fact that, you have had players that have come and gone here in this program and now are making, starters on an elite level there in the NBA Finals. So just kind of shows you, what Coach Few has done for this program here in this last, 25 years or so. 9 consecutive seasons starting and ending in the top 25. They're a consistent program. Don't see much changing here. They only really lost one kind of, I call it portal loss. They did lose a couple guys to graduation, but only one portal loss with Michael Ajayi leaving. However, they bring in several people, some from kind of the red shirt where they've redshirted them, something that Mark Few typically does. Braden Smith is that red shirt, came from Colgate, was Patriot League Player of the Year in 23-24, averaged 12.5, 5 and 5, can shoot it. I'd like to see him shoot better from the three. He's like around a 31% 3-point shooter. Hopefully he can take a little bit of a little step forward just on that 3-point shooting end, and be kind of one of those guys that can just be a little bit more consistent there. But you said, you return Ike, you also return Braden Huff, kind of their sixth man off the bench. Big guy, has been stuck behind several seasoned veteran big men, and he averaged 11 points last year. I think he's going to assume a big starting role, be the 4-man there, kind of down low in the front court with Ike, and I don't think you get a better front court with Ike and Huff. And then you also have a redshirt, came in from Virginia, kind of was in that when that Tony Bennett transition when he left. Ended up transferring. Jalen Worley comes in from Virginia, sat out last year as a redshirt. And then another guy that I'm kind of high on. I just hope that he stays injury free. Steele Venters. He's a guy that was at Eastern Washington when they were first there in the Big Sky. But the year he came to Gonzaga, tore his ACL, and then last year ended up tearing his opposite Achilles. So has sat out the last 2 years due to injury. If he can stay healthy, I expect him to definitely play a key role for them. And then you mentioned a couple of the transfers they bring in, and a couple freshmen as well. But Adam Miller from Arizona State shoots the ball at a high clip, 43% from the three. I expect him to be one of their heavy 3-point shooters, and kind of have Braden Smith facilitate to him. And then Tyon Grant Foster. This is kind of the biggest question mark for how good this team can be. I think it's a significantly higher ceiling if he's able to get his waiver or not. Still pending the NCAA waiver right now for his 6th year of eligibility due to all of his heart issues. NCAA did give him a practice waiver. I was kind of looking up some things to see if they had granted him full waiver yet, but they gave him a practice waiver. So he just showed up end of September, beginning of October, and has been practicing with the team. He also was in that they do like kind of a midnight madness there at the kennel, and he participated in that as well. But still hasn't been fully cleared to participate in games. So we'll see if the NCAA clears him or not. And I think that really can raise the ceiling on this team. And then a couple guys to watch out for. Mario Saint-Supri, he comes from France. He's a freshman point guard, will be the backup to Braden Smith, but I also see him playing the 2 as well. And they can be kind of a 1-2 tandem there in the backcourt for the Zags. And then the last guy that I'll mention is Davis Vogel. He was ranked 33rd in ESPN Top 100. So one of the higher recruits. Obviously they brought in Chet Holmgren, number 1 recruit overall. But they bring him in, 33rd recruit. I think he's probably like their 5th or 6th highest recruit that Gonzaga's brought in. Last year kind of showed why. 32 points, 10 rebounds, 5 blocks a game in high school. So just kind of another talented acquisition that they bring in from the high school ranks. And yeah, I know Raymond, he mentioned Dusty Stromer left there to Grand Canyon. He didn't really play very much for them last year, and with the guys that they brought in, I didn't see him playing, maybe not playing as much this year. So I think their big portal loss was that Michael Ajayi for sure, because he was a starter on last year's team, or kind of in that 6th man role. But super high on Gonzaga. I think they're the favorite to win, and a bigger favorite, in my opinion, than the last few years, just with the graduation of a few guys on St. Mary's that we'll talk about. And so I think maybe, St. Mary's will maybe take a small step back. They're still going to be number 2 here in the conference, but I think Gonzaga has been able to solidify its position here at the top with the pieces that they brought in.
Sorry about that. I had some audio issues there. Can you hear me? All right.
Yep, you're good.
Gonzaga. Definitely front runners. Not front runners. Loyola Marymount, the Lions out of Los Angeles. Last season, 17-15, 8-10 in the West Coast Conference. 1 returning starter for Stan Johnson, 72 and 73. They lose a lot of pieces. Their starter last year, MJ Amy, returns. He was going to be taking that jump and going to be heavy usage from him. And then also from the bench, John Vide, pretty lengthy stretch 2 or wing, excuse me. We're kind of was off the bench, but it definitely matters about taking a jump. And then you bring in transfer Rodney Brown from Virginia Tech, Jalen Shelley from USC, Rokas Yoshis from UCF. So they went Portland. They went Portland heavy for Loyola Marymount. But I don't know if it's like the most heavy pieces, just because they come from a P5. I mean, yeah, they have talent, but it's all about gelling. So I think, yeah, they have a lot of players on this team that they can go to. Maybe not the guy outside of MJ Amy, but talent-wise, it may be an issue. But I do like the portal pieces that they brought in, so I think they could be competitive, of course. So yeah, always love them out.
Yeah, and they brought in those high major portal additions, but really the significant amount of production that they brought in via the portal came from the mid-major ranks. So it's really going to see how it translate up here in a higher type of a conference. It's going to be more competitive. They bring in Tanner Thomas from Sacred Heart, 14.5 a game, 37.5% from 3, and Nikel Shelton from Eastern Illinois, averaged 17 points, 5 rebounds. So a lot of those guys you mentioned were definitely high major bounce back kind of guys that didn't really necessarily produce at that level. So I think depending on if these 2 mid-major guys that they brought in, if they can kind of produce at or near that level again that they had shown last year at their mid-majors, Loyola Marymount might be able to be a little bit more competitive and remain competitive and kind of be in that 8 to 10 middle of the pack here in the WCC. But it's really hard to tell if it'll translate up a conference. With them coming from Sacred Heart and then Eastern Illinois. Another guy I'll mention that I think is going to be a big impact player for them is Jael Martin. He redshirted last year, actually had a bad case of mono and was sick all year, so didn't get any playing time. They decided to redshirt him due to the illness. But I I think, and would expect him to be a vital piece here for Loyola. And I think that Coach Johnson is hopeful for the same as well. So I'm not too high on them, but like I said, if they can get a good amount of production from those mid-major guys that they brought in, they could be a formidable opponent and maybe finish here in the middle of the WCC.
The Oregon State Beavers out of Corvallis, 20-13, fifth in the WCCC. Sorry, no record. Whole new rebrand for Mr. Wayne Tinkle, 160 and 190, 11 years. Gotta love Mr. Wayne Tinkle. He brought him to an Elite Eight one year, I think, randomly, and they should never even have been in the tournament. So always a feisty bunch, well coached, but sometimes just lacks discipline. And but this, I felt like they it was a good year for them into the WCCC before they take that step into the Pac-12. But yeah, the Beavers gonna have to be a whole new rebrand. So hopefully their synergy starts immediately. But it doesn't matter because you can kind of be okay and still make the crown tournament and get a bag. So yes, I don't know if that's coming back or not. I think it is. Sorry for that. Don't know the answer, but I remember could bet on one or two games and they just didn't pay anyone out and voided, and it was all unregulated mess. So yeah, crown tournament. What a flop the first year, but it was fun if you actually watched it. But I feel like it lost a lot of its luster when that betting stuff happened. But anywho, yes, they went to the crown tournament. They did a lot of jumping in the off season. They bring in a decent amount of pieces. So I gotta say, I like the size that they bring in here, and definitely could be a physical presence down low.
Yeah, 10-8 last year there in the WCC. Just looked that up for you. But I think this is a program that was definitely dealt a bad hand with on the NIL front. They don't have near the funding that a lot of these WCC people or other WCC teams do. And also, when you're just talking about Power Five, there's NIL is significantly lower. I mean, last year. Their starting lineup kind of made just over 400,000. And you look at where a lot of their starting lineup left. Michael Rataj went to Baylor, Parsifala to Oklahoma State, Nate Kings to Syracuse. And now their starting roster that they had last year that was only making 400 is now making about 4 million combined. So hard to compete and to keep players when your NIL front is severely lacking. I know that Coach Tinkle has said that, Oregon State and just the administration, the athletic department, they're committed to boosting that NIL fund, especially before they return to the Pac-12. So we'll see if that really happens. Only 4 returners, as you had mentioned. I think a big guy that's going to have to take a step up for them is Josiah Lake, averaged 7 points last year. I think he's going to just need to be a little bit more consistent on the scoring front, shoot a little bit better. But like you said, they bring in a significant amount of guys. One of the guys, the twins, the Diaz-Graham twins from Pitt. We've got one of them here on the Oregon State team, and then one on another WCC team that we'll talk about later. The worst twin, I feel like, Jorge. He's coming into Oregon State, averaged 3 points and 1 rebound. Didn't really play much for Pitt last year, but I'm kind of high on Des White from Missouri State. Guard, averaged 14 points. And then Keziah Akisi, he was a JUCO player, number 6 JUCO point guard last year. And he, 12 and a half points a game, shot 43% from the 3. So another guy that I think fits Tinkle's system. And we'll see how they all mesh. They brought in some freshmen, some international players, Malcolm Christie from Oakland, Stephen Olanowi from Southern Indiana. So just a lot of people from the mid-major ranks, and you would expect that when you don't have a big NIL budget. And, so it's hard for me. I think that they maybe lack the talent that they had last year, just seeing where all of those guys ended up. And so I think it may be a little bit of a step back here for them, just because they're not going to be able to be as competitive talent-wise as some of these other teams here in the WCC.
Pacific, similar color scheme out of Stockton, California last season, 9-24, 4-14 in the West Coast Conference, tied for ninth. One returning starter for Dave Smart's second year here under the helm of Pacific, a school full of psychopaths. No, I'm totally kidding. I just remember they totally ruined one of my bet slips. This was before I had any like podcast or anything, like when it was first popping, and I didn't know anything about betting really. And 16, it was like when DraftKings didn't have, like, I don't know, let you do whatever they want back then. But it first got popping, and I hit Evansville against Kentucky or whatever, and I thought I was the man. And then I had this long parlay, 16 legs, like $3, but I was gonna win like 4 grand. I don't know. It was insane. But Pacific screwed it up, and I was like, I've always had a vendetta against them. But anywho, that's a little story time here. So let's skip forward to the actual stuff. But yeah, kind of another rebrand for Pacific for year 2 under Dave Smart. I think he's actually a pretty good coach. It wasn't the best year, but he's working with what he got. You do bring in a guard from Lamar, all Southland as well. Um, Team from Alexis Marmagello. Sorry for the butchering name pronunciation. You also bring in a guy from UC San Diego who is a role-playing piece, Justin Rochland, who's actually able to produce, and then also had a stint at Oregon State. So bouncing around. And then TJ Wainwright from Long Beach State as well, transferring in. So a lot of good transfers coming in. I think it's definitely a possibility for it's an improvement for Pacific. You never know what you're going to get. But I actually like Pacific taking a little better step than they were last year, and definitely getting into the double-digit win column. I don't know. I have to take a look at their non-conference schedule. Definitely something we'll improve on our previews for next time, but next season. But yeah, I'm kind of excited for Pacific. I think they definitely could take a step up from last season, just due to the pieces that they brought in, and I think they bring in some good scoring, which is what they just kind of lacked last season.
Yeah, I'm impressed with what Dave Smart did in the offseason there. He's a coach that comes from Canada, and so he brings in 6 Canadians here on the roster. When he was interviewed, he basically said his offseason work that he did was about 20 times better than last year's, and the talent he has and the depth that he has is significantly better. He thinks that maybe his starting 5 is similar to the quality and the talent. However, the next 5 is significantly far and above better than what they had last year. So the fact that he's been able to bring in the pieces there in the offseason to not only get a little bit more talented, possibly there at the starting front of the 5 starters, but also just get a significant amount of talent there, and the depth is going to be huge for them this year. I too expect for Pacific to take a step up here. Their big guy, Elias Ralph, he's a fellow Canadian as well, averaged almost 15 points, 7 rebounds, 1.5 blocks a game last year. I think they're going to rely on him. He's going to be their kind of go-to guy as their one returning starter. And then a guy that I'll look out for is their probable starting point guard for Pacific, Cages Kubalikis. He came in from Florida, was on the national championship team last year, so obviously has tremendous experience, postseason experience. Just being a part of that Florida national championship team is going to be huge. So the fact that Pacific was able to bring him in, I know he's going to be an immediate impact starter from him. And then another Canadian, Jaden Clayton. Comes from Maine, kind of going coast to coast here. 7.5 points a game, 4 assists a game. So I think he can be a fellow guard in the backcourt that can play well with Kubalikis here. And then, you had mentioned the guy from Lamar. I'll mention another guy, Emmanuel Manuan. He came from Garden City Community College here from Kansas. Tough defender, averaged about 12 points, really shoots the ball pretty well as well. And then brings in, a couple other guys. D2 guy from Canada, Augustus Brazadikis, averaged 15.7 rebounds. We'll see how that translates to the D1 level. And then some other guys, Casey Abique and Isaac Jack from Washington and Dayton, respectively. So I think he brought in a lot more talented pieces than he had last year. I like him as a coach. I like what he's done. So I think they do in fact take a pretty sizable step up here, and maybe finish in the middle of the pack here in the WCC.
Hey, cheers, Redmond. Cheers, Raymond. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. Yes, good night always. Now we're talking West Coast 26 preview. Let's go. Unbelievable. Yeah, high on Pacific. Oh baby. I got a love for Pepperdine. Zoey 101, Malibu, California. Last season, 13-22, 4-14, one returning starter, and they dealt with what we thought was Mother Nature, but I think it was somebody that got arrested. I don't know, allegedly, for the Malibu fires that they had to deal with last year. So they persevere. They're persevere Pepperdine, and I was the Pepperdine guru. Knew when to fade them, knew when it took them, and they weren't that bad against the spread. You bring back two medical red shirts and Aaron Clark and Javon Cooley. I think they're going to be making an immediate impact also as well. And then you dive into the portal and get a Utah State transfer from Serbia, Pavle Stosh. Pavle Stosh. I think I said that properly. And then you get a Yale transfer as well in Yasni Garin. So bringing in some more physicality. I think they kind of lack that presence down low. And just a little more not relying on the three, but they can kind of get that stretch four kind of mentality of guys popping in and out. They could be very dangerous with that kind of motion, kind of run and gun style that they play. So, yeah, I mean, all props to Pepperdine. They dealt with a lot of adversity last year, and they just went right through it and started winning some games, and they were covering as well. So I got a soft spot for Pepperdine. I love them. I'm always going to support the Waves. I may or may not have a hat for Pepperdine along the way, but talent-wise, yeah, they're an issue. It's bullshit though. They have such a nice campus, so much money. Let's figure it out, guys. But yeah, the talent-wise, on an unbiased perspective, they may be down below in this conference at the low end for talent. But
they got heart.
You know what? They got heart, and they're Pepperdine, damn it. And they got Jet X's, and they drink Blix for Zoey 101. So soft spot for Pepperdine. Shout out them last season and all they went through.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was a tough year last year with those Palisades fires. I was reading up a little bit on it, and there was players that were having to stay in the gym just because a lot of them are off-campus houses. They're on the campus. They don't really have like a lot of dorms. And so there was a lot of highways and road shutdowns. So players were having to stay in the gym. A lot of players were having to stay in hotels. They were able to practice off campus. They didn't have a home court atmosphere. With all that being said, 13-22, 4-14, I think is fairly respectable. You think those fires happened in January, right in the middle of the season, kind of upended everything right when kind of West Coast Conference play was starting. Very tough year for Pepperdine, and like you said, it's easy to root for them. I wish they could figure something out on, like you said, on the NIL front. They should be able to bring in good talent just with the amount of money that they have there at the school. So maybe they can figure it out. You mentioned Cooley. I think he's going to be a big piece for them. Shot 47.5% from three at Marist before he medically redshirted last year. Another guy they bring in, I think kind of the story for them is going to be how these guys that he brought in translate. There's a few international players that I think played there at Serbia's top league, and then another guy that kind of played in Montenegro as well. So it's really going to be how these international guys step up to this competition here in the D1 level. And then also another guy, Preston Phillips from Bethel, Indiana, played at Bethel University there. NAIA, averaged 11 points, shot 44.5% from three. And he previously played at Evansville. So he does have some Division I experience. But yeah, I think it all depends on how Luka Vujovic and Nikola Radovanovic are able to translate their game. They both played in the KLS Pro League, which is Serbia's top league last year. So, if that translates well and they're able to be competitive, I think that they can be, a fairly respected team and be definitely competitive here in the WCC. Not saying that they're going to be, anything special, but I think they have some talent wise to kind of keep them in some games. And especially if now you have an actual home court, you can actually play at home, things like that. That'll be helpful as well. And then I wish Trevor was here because Jonathan Levy from Green Bay, he comes in as a transfer from Green Bay. Curious to see what Trevor thought about him. I think if I remember correctly, he was the guy last year that we were kind of pretty high on coming into Green Bay, and he didn't come in until like December or January or something. I can't quite remember, but I think he came in like super late because Gottlieb got him, came over from the Pro League, if I remember, but he transferred over. And then Yassine Garam from Yale, another guy shoots it at a high clip, 47% from three. So it's kind of a trend here in the WCC. I kind of maybe should have led with this there before we got into a lot of the team previews, but the West Coast Conference is kind of a conference I feel like is run by, if you're going to be successful, you're going to shoot the three at a high clip, and you're going to be able to make a lot of threes, but you're also going to be able to defend a lot of threes. So you kind of look at what, Gonzaga, St. Mary's do. What do? They can defend really well. They defend the perimeter really well, shut down on the 3-point line, and they make a bunch of threes too. So, throughout the WCC, you'll just see a lot of guys that are brought in transfer-wise that really shoot the ball at a high clip, because I think that's kind of the West Coast style of basketball that's played here in this conference. But yeah, I'm high on Pepperdine. Let's go Zoey 101. Always fun to cheer for. I'll root for them. Maybe I'll put them at the top of my conference just for fun.
Look at you. Lorenzo Romar is on. He's an assistant in this conference. I think it's for Steve Lavin, though. I can't remember. I'll have to double check that. Look that up for me, Elliot, while I read the Portland Pilots. Please look that up. Sorry, I didn't mean to sound like
Loyola Marymount.
Loyola Marymount, yeah. Yes, he's an assistant there. So for the Portland Pilots, out of Portland, Oregon, the Fentline, last season 12-20, 7-11, finished 8th in the conference, 0 returning starters for Shante Legions. 58-75. It's kind of been a rough go for him, for Portland, a team that likes to run and gun, like you mentioned, on that high clip rate scenario. But it's now just a complete rebrand. So he's going to have to figure it out. They're kind of on the lower end of NIL funds in this West Coast Conference, so I don't believe they're taking the jump to the Pac-12. So it might be good for them once some of those big boys leave. But you bring in a transfer from St. Francis, Riley Parker, which is impressive. You bring in a transfer. Who am I looking at? A couple JUCO guys, Cameron Williams, Garrett Knuckles. Hey, give me Knuckles, brother. So that's always exciting. I think you bring in some shooters and a decent a front court as well. You improve down low and the rebounding with Jermaine Ballinger-Webb. 7'1", 260 pounds, say less. He can shoot. So we always are looking for big men in the league now that can shoot with this style of basketball play. So yeah, I mean, I think they definitely brought in the right pieces for their style of play with shooting. But again, talent, athleticism wise, I don't think they'll be able to compete with the top players. But they'll win some games in this conference and be competitive like they were kind of last year. I think probably a similar style, and Legion's got to get it figured out after he can't get anything really going with that record through 4 years.
Yeah, he brings in, he recruits heavily out of Australia, and Riley Parker, he's an Australian. You had mentioned him. Another Australian that they bring in, Joel Foxwell. He'll be a freshman. I think he's going to make an immediate impact for them. The Cameron Williams, he's kind of an interesting guy that you brought up. JUCO guy. He played at Trinity Valley with Garrett Knuckles. They both played together, so they'll have a little bit of that experience on the court together. So that could be a good thing for him. But Cameron Williams, he's from Cape Girardeau, so I'm curious to see why SEMO maybe didn't pick him up, because that's where SEMO is at, and I feel like maybe he would have been able to fit the style there. for SEMO, but nonetheless, good pickup for Portland. I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said, they don't have a lot of NIL. They don't return any starters. They got 8 newcomers, bring in, a few returners, but a lot of them just didn't have much production. The only guy that had production was Jermaine Balasager-Webb that you had mentioned, started in 8 of 29 games last year. I'm not very, very high on him. Maybe Matas Hronsky from Duquesne can maybe be a good piece for them as well. But you look at what kind of, like, if I'm going back and kind of looking at what Pacific did and who they brought in, I feel like they had a significantly better transfer class, just talent wise, and the pieces that they brought in. And so I feel like Pacific is going to be able to take that step forward where Portland might take that step back. And I see that Portland finishing near the bottom of the conference here. Also, it's tough you're on mute, but it's tough because Jay Alvarez, I was looking at this earlier before the show. He was a guy, came over from Rider last year. The year before, he averaged 15.5 points at Houston Christian. But he was another guy, kind of like Tyon Grant Foster, was trying to get his waiver for his 6th year, and doesn't look like he got that waiver. So that's going to be a pretty big impact for them because I think he was a guard that they were going to really rely upon. But when I looked at the roster on their website, the school's website didn't have him listed. So I would assume that means that he didn't get his waiver.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. Is that also a comedian name or no? But anyway, Elliot, you always lead some first. I love putting you on the spot, and you didn't get to last time. It's bullshit.
So you're gonna make me lead the team that I always battled you against and argued with last year? Can't I lead my team and you lead your team?
No, no. Maybe you do both. Maybe we up the ante a little bit. Yeah, go ahead and take St. Mary's. Yes, the team that I just.
The team that I absolutely decimated, my Santa Clara Broncos. Is that what you wanted me to say?
And San Francisco and all these other teams. I was
on. Me and you were battling. I thought Santa Clara would be able to cover, and St. Mary's proved me wrong. Moraga there proved me wrong. But yeah, so St. Mary's Gales there at Moraga, California. Last season, 29-6. 17-1, first in the West Coast Conference in Randy Bennett's 24th year last year. Now he's going to be starting in his quarter century, 25th year here at St. Mary's with a 562 and 222 record. So obviously, as you can tell by the record and his experience, hell of a coach, hell of a program. Despite the portal, he's been able to kind of keep his own philosophy and continue doing what he always does, and that's bring in players, develop players. Not quite sure how he gets them to stay, but he does. He redshirts a lot of players. This roster in particular has about 7 redshirts, or 7 players that have already used a red shirt. So, they're guys that have tremendous experience within the program as well. But this will be an interesting year for them because they lose three of their big pieces from last year. So it'll be interesting to see how they can replace that production that they lost. I will say only have 1 senior on the roster. And I do have a quiz question for you since you're such a Gale lover. But they were one of 2 teams in the NCAA to win or share the regular season conference tournament in the last 3 years. Name the other team.
And that they've won their at least a share.
They've either
in the last 3 years.
So yep, they've won or they've shared the regular season conference tournament title the last 3 years.
High Point?
Nope. Starts with an H.
Starts with an H. Well, that helps. Fuck.
We haven't discussed them.
Houston.
There we go.
Nice.
Little trivia for you.
Keep me on my toes. I love trivia. Bar trivia is fun. But yeah, that's fun. I mean, yeah, St. Mary's, they're always gonna be competitive. I don't care who walks in through the door. They always find the right pieces that works for them. And Randy Bennett is such a good system that he's developed, and they're just gonna grind you out, spit you out, freaking just slugfest kind of style of basketball, which works in this conference for teams that have to run and gun. And occasionally they can score a lot of points, but a lot of 55, 52 games, or 67, 48, just some blowouts, man. And they know how to win in this conference. So yeah, I'm not worried about St. Mary's whatsoever, even with the pieces they lost.
Yeah, you lose Augustus Marciulionis, Luke Barrett, and Mitchell Saxon. So some guys that you think will possibly cause them to take a step back. However, I'd pump the brakes there. They got 10 returners on that NCAA tournament team from last year, led by Mikey Lewis. He was WCC all-freshman team as a guard, averaged 8 points in 16 minutes. Then you also have Paulius Morauskas. He was first-team all-WCC down low in the front court, averaged 12 points, 7.5 rebounds. And then you also have Harry Wessels, a guy that averaged 5 points, shot about 55% from the field, 82% from the free throw line. One thing that you've always mentioned with St. Mary's is they're tremendous free throw shooters. They don't lose games down the stretch because they play in Bennett's system. They play slow, 363rd in tempo, one of the dead last, I believe. I think is it 363 dead last, or is it 366 now? I can't remember.
But yeah, I mean, there's new additions.
365. So 363 of 365 in tempo. And the fact that they shoot the free throw so well just shows how they can succeed and finish those games down the stretch. They bring in two guys, and kind of a theme also in the WCC that you'll realize when you kind of do some research is the fact that a lot of the transfers come intra-conference, which is a little weird, but they bring in Jazz Gardner from Pacific, averaged 4.5 points, 3 rebounds, shot about 60% from the field, kind of your typical front court guy that Coach Bennett likes. And then they bring in Tony Duckett from San Diego, another WCC all-freshman guard last year, averaged 10.5 points, 87% from the free throw line. So I think you pair him up with Mikey Lewis there in the backcourt. You've got Paulius Morauskas down below, and you've got several red shirts that are red shirt. Same thing that Randy Bennett does always in his system is red shirt 3 or 4 guys that you've never heard of, and then they become immediate impact players like Augustus Marciulionis, Luke Barrett, Mitchell Saxon. Same kind of philosophy, same thing that they did within the program. So those guys to kind of keep an eye out for. Rory Hawk, Liam Campbell, Oliver Faubert are the 3 red shirts that I'll expect to make an immediate impact as they come off the red shirt year.
San Diego, the Toreros out of San Diego, California last season, 6-27, 2-16 in the West Coast Conference, finished 11th, 0 returning starters under Mr. Steve Lavin, a household name in this college basketball sphere, major player in the 90s, decent run, St. John's, whatever. But yeah, Lavin, just they lacked everything. They lacked give a shit. Watching them was rough, man. It looked like guys that were just picked out of the portal in the wrong way. More like portal, they were going into classrooms and stuff. But you do bring in Tyler Johnson from Wake Forest, so got into the portal for the new rebrand. Georgia State transfer as well, who had some time at Winthrop, which is always nice. And then also Southern Utah transfer in Dominique Ford. That all these guys were able to score. They averaged like 10 points a game. Maybe not coming from the greatest teams, but definitely an improvement on talent this year, especially in the scoring department. I think they definitely have a much better backcourt, and I think they can compete with a lot of these up-tempo teams that force you to score in their style of play. So, yeah, NJIT transfer as well, and Tim Moore Jr. So San Diego, I think, just was a crapshoot last season. You finished 2-16 in the conference. It's nothing impressive. 6-27 in the in overall, just really bad, and finished dead last. So I think it's an improvement on last, but it's not a major step. It's just a little stepping stone. So yeah, major step up from last season though, in the talent department at least for the Toreros and Steve Lavin.
Yeah, I think one thing that allowed Steve Lavin to bring in a lot more talented pieces was the fact that they opened their $35 million basketball performance center here in April. So it's something that he can show to recruits and show to families and kind of catch the eye of some people, especially transfers like Tyler Johnson from Wake Forest. Wanze Gurasoto came from Ball State, your alma mater. But also was a freshman, all freshman WCC at Portland before he transferred to Ball State. So they brought in so much talent that Lavin actually toyed with the idea of redshirting KJ Bradley. He's got 2 years of eligibility left, but KJ Bradley was like their leading returner, averaged 14 and a half points for them last year. He was kind of toying with the idea of possibly redshirting him just for some continuity. However, when I was looking at the roster on their website, looks like he's not getting redshirted. Another guy that is getting redshirted that I was kind of high on was Vuk Boskovich. He's a freshman, comes in, but he will be redshirting this year, so we'll have to wait a year on him. But yeah, so the fact that they have two kind of guards that I think are going to be really good in Tyler Johnson and Wanze Gorosito, alongside of KJ Bradley returning. That's some significant talent there in the backcourt. And then you got some front court guys. I think a guy to mention is Hassan Diop from Colorado. Was a kind of a part-time starter there for a Big 12 team. Now you're dropping down to the West Coast Conference. I think he'll be able to make an immediate impact for Lavin and the Toreros there. So I'm with you. I think that I don't think they're going to be a last like they were. I think they're going to take a little step up, and it just is shown with the talent that he has brought in. And I think that, they'll be above a few other teams and maybe finish in that 8th or 9th kind of area.
Out of San Francisco, California. Last season, 25-10, 13-5, finished third in the conference, though. 2 returning starters for Chris Gerlofson, 68-35 for 3 years. I smell a jump if it's a good season. But yeah, San Francisco is fun to watch, man. We liked betting on them last season. They competed heavy in the non-conference last year. They're doing the double up again with Memphis, so they'll play Memphis again. But yeah, I think they're going to have a solid another MTE to go to, playing some solid mid-major teams and a couple P5 schools. So that's always nice. Trying to get a couple quad 1, quad 2 wins. Always good for potentially being on the bye and in this conference having to compete with Gonzaga and St. Mary's. But talent-wise, they're up there, man. I feel like this program's just getting back to how they should. Growing up, they can score. I just felt like they were streaky. This team could only play like one half last season, and that was their major issue. But scoring is not an issue. They're able to run and gun. They like to move and transition, play that kind of motion style offense. And I love the talent that they bring in from the portal. A couple interconference transfers as well that can shoot the ball. So there's some familiarity and continuity in the conference that they can bring together, even with pieces leaving for the Dons. But 2 returning starters, always a good thing. And I think they have one of the best backcourts and one of the best shooters in this conference for the West Coast. So very high on the Dons yet again. And I like what Gerlofson's done with this school. And I think they definitely could be flirty and just up there right on third. I think their floor is super, super high. And they have a chance. They have a chance to do something great. But Gonzaga, I think, is my front runner in this conference, of course, always. But they could. I think San Francisco could get second.
I don't think so. I think there's a top 2, and then there's a definite drop off, especially with the production that San
There you go. There, I got you there. Yeah, St. Mary's. Yeah, yep.
Especially because there's a significant drop off in competition, and they lost a lot of production, losing Malik Thomas and Marcus Williams there at the guard play. That's about 35 points per game that they're missing from last year. Kind of a guard-heavy team that they've always kind of been. Interesting stat that I came across: 25-3 against West Coast Conference opponents if you exclude Gonzaga and St. Mary's. So that just shows you that there's kind of one tier. There's that Gonzaga and St. Mary's tier, and then you got the tier of probably just San Francisco, and then there's everybody else. So it just kind of shows you just how the WCC is divided. But yeah, I agree. I'm high on Ryan Beasley and I'm high on Tyrone Riley, those two guys that you had mentioned that are returners. Ryan Beasley kind of showed us a little bit more of what he's able to do. I think he got, he was a freshman last year, was kind of stuck behind Marcus Williams. But then when Marcus Williams was out of the WCC tournament and the NIT due to the eligibility issues that he was having, he showed us what he was made of. 29 points against Washington State there in the West Coast Conference tournament, and then again 19 points in a win in the NIT against Utah Valley. So it kind of shows what you're getting with Ryan Beasley. I think he's kind of shows that he's a proven guard that can score here at this level. So I expect him to take a tremendous jump forward this year. Only averaged 9 points last year. I could see that possibly getting up into that 15-16 range. And then another guy that I'm kind of high on as well, David Fuchs, comes from Rhode Island, averaged 7.5 points, 7.5 rebounds, kind of 58% from the field. And then I'll have to also shout out the better brother, Guillermo Diaz-Graham, comes from Pitt. Again, averaged 6 points, 5 rebounds. A guy that I think is going to be able to fit within the kind of run and gun system that San Francisco has. He's a guy that can get up and down the floor as a 5-man, can really run the court, be a good rim protector, but then also get out in transition. When the guards get their ball in their hands, he's going to be kind of that rim runner that they can kind of throw it up to and get a couple easy dunks there in transition. So good pickup for them. And then a freshman to watch out for, possibly maybe freshman of the year here in the WCC. Not quite sure if they give that award, but Legend Smiley. I think he's a guy that is going to make an immediate impact as a freshman here at San Francisco. Was at Link Prep here in Missouri, or there in Missouri last year. Coach Gerlofson is very high on him, and I think he's going to earn not necessarily a starting role, but he's going to earn a lot of minutes. And then he can, if he's able to prove that he can compete at that level, he's just going to further gain more minutes as the season goes along. So definitely high on San Francisco, not high enough to dethrone the top two. I think there's a clear top two here in the WCC. I do like you had mentioned, Huff, that they test themselves. Not only were they going to play Memphis, but they're also playing St. Louis, Mississippi State, Minnesota, Colorado, and they actually have 2 home games there in San Francisco against Bradley and Loyola Chicago. So kind of a couple mid-major games that can kind of separate and break some bubbles potentially. So I like what San Francisco brought in. I like what they return. They do lose some production. So I kind of got them finishing third. Again, I think there's kind of a clear 1, 2, 3. You could maybe make a case for this 4th team that we're about to talk with to maybe be competitive, but it's kind of unproven with what they've brought in.
I'd have to disagree. Santa Clara, the Broncos out of Santa Clara, California, last season 21-13, 12-6 in the West Coast, finishing 4th. 0 returning starters under Herb Stedek, who's had a solid program. Last 4 seasons in a row. 20 win conference, or 20 total wins on the season, 4 years in a row. You've had some solid talent go through there, but now with this rebranding, I'm not really sure, but I do trust Herb Sendek and what he brings, and can make any guys kind of work for their offense. But so yeah, this is gonna be a new face for them. Definitely leaving. You got Tilly leaving, Bow leaving. But you do bring back Elijah Mahi, who was 12 points per game. Got a couple scores that you have in Brenton Napper and Jake Enzeminger. And then Bucky O'Boy from UC Riverside coming in also. But you do have some transfers on the low end that hasn't really proven themselves outside of the JUCOs that you bring in NAIA that have been able to score. But, so this is kind of like a wild card team. Like you mentioned, they could be good, but I'm not too high on the Broncos this year. I trust Herb Sendek. I hate to bet against him and say that he won't have a good team, but it definitely will be a step back in what we've seen the last few years for the Broncos, in my opinion.
Yeah, finished top 4 in the WCC in the last 4 seasons. That garnered Santa Clara to extend Sendek's contract through 2030. So shout out to Coach Sendek there. Congratulations on the contract extension through 2030. I think 2 guys also that return that you hadn't mentioned are 2 redshirt guys. Christian Hammond, he was a redshirt last year, and then a guy that I'm high on is Alan Graves. Redshirted last year as well. He was the 2023-24 Gatorade Player of the Year in Louisiana. As we've constantly seen, Sendek has a knack and an eye for getting talent. Several Santa Clara players that have made that jump from the WCC into the NBA and made an immediate impact and are still playing on the NBA level. I think Braden Przinski. I know that maybe these guys are possibly unproven. Some of them at least are unproven. There's a couple guys that are bouncing back from the high majors. You got Garrick Norman coming from Michigan State, Chris Tahoe from Iowa, and Alexander Gavalagov from Villanova. So some guys that are unproven, haven't really been able to see the floor and to kind of get the experience needed and put together production. However, I trust Coach Sendek to know what he's getting, know what he's recruiting, what he sees on the talent end. I trust that he's been able to bring in the talent that he thinks is going to be able to yet again be competitive here in the WCC. And then a couple freshmen that I'll kind of mention as well. You got a guy from France, Noah Badabanga. And then you also got a guy, Francis. I apologize for butchering this last name, but Francis Chukwudebelo. He was actually offered by KU, Texas, Alabama, Michigan State, several other P5 offers, but chose Santa Clara as well. Big guy from Texas, 6'10", 220. Like I said, they're kind of a wild card team. You could make a case if all of the talent is there that Coach Sendek thinks he has. You can make a case that San Francisco is going to kind of be battling Santa Clara for that 3rd and 4th spot. But I feel like it's a very clear 1, 2, 3, 4, and then very clear 1, 2, 3, probably so. 4 is right here, but you have a little bit of upside, possible ceiling of getting to 3. Definitely not getting to those top 2 teams. I think for the 5th straight year, Santa Clara is going to finish in the top 4.
Redman, to your point, yeah, if Gonzaga leaves, and the WCC is wide open, so teams will be like, maybe not, but yeah, that Pac-12 money may be calling to try to compete with that with these other P5s.
If Gonzaga leaves too, the problem with that is
they're gone. They're not. They are leaving.
Oh yeah. So when Gonzaga leaves, it's going to be the issue is now the WCC is an automatic bid league. It's not a 2-bid league. It's not a 3-bid league because of just Gonzaga kind of helps bolster that conference, and then losing them, and not to mention losing Oregon State and Washington State. Now what? You've got maybe St. Mary's and San Francisco, make a case for Santa Clara, but then surrounded and being brought down by a bunch of the likes of Portland, Pepperdine, San Diego, Pacific. So it might be a 1-bid league, and that's what I was kind of talking to Raymond about earlier. Maybe Randy Bennett goes elsewhere, just seeing the writing on the wall that the WCC is a 1-big league. I know he can have success at St. Mary's and basically win the WCC year in and year out. But is that what he wants to do? I don't know. Maybe he wants to challenge himself and go elsewhere with the fact that Gonzaga's leaving.
Point there. 25 years for Randy Bennett, by the way. Diamond anniversary, is that what it is? All right. Penultimate team in this West Coast. We're getting in this under an hour, just a little bit. Seattle Redhawks out of Seattle, Washington, 14-18, 12-6. Finished 4th with 0 returning starters, and Herb Sendek is not the coach. It's Chris Victor. Chris Victor is the coach, but they do have 3 returning starters, so everything else is right. So for people that are going to screenshot this and get upset, this is a mistake. But yeah, you lose a ton of pieces here, and now you have to take the jump into the West Coast Conference. I think it's just bad timing for Seattle, but they do bring in a lot of pieces that can shoot the ball. They're going to be able to, I think, gel into this conference pretty well, into the, with their style and talent and depth at the backcourt, and being able to shoot the ball. They're going to be able to run and gun right away. And they got a decent amount of size as well too. So yeah, Braden Maldonado, of course, he's going to be able to bring in some double digit scoring for Seattle, and being able to score the ball. And then also a San Francisco guy, Mike Amos, coming in from a JUCO area. So yeah, I think they could be flirty, another wild card kind of team, just like Santa Clara. And I think their style of play is going to fit in just fine, but maybe not having an understanding of how other teams play could be an issue. But there's so much information out there in film that good coaches can, and Seattle has always had a good coach, and I like what Victor's been able to do. So, but always that transition year could be tough, especially into a new conference. So I think it could be a little step back. It wasn't the same Seattle we know, but we do love the crack house, and we know that brings a ton of just that's the six man there. So yeah, they definitely know what they're doing, and can have some home wins with their crowds. So yeah, I like Seattle. They got depth. I think they'll be a middle of the road in the WCC, but not at the complete bottom.
Yeah, I think that's you make a good point. They're a team that's going to be able to be competitive against the bottom half of this conference, which then I think puts them kind of right there in the middle of the WCC. I don't see them being competitive at the top half. I see them maybe finishing as high as 5 or 6 and as low as kind of 8 or 9. That's probably where I can kind of rank them or kind of see them kind of finishing. They didn't bring back any starters, but they do have some guys on the team that are returning. Malik Arrington was WAC all defensive team last year, averaged 7.5 points. John Christophilus, he started 25 of 32 games, averaged just under 10 points a game. And then Haran Don, he's another guy that didn't really average too much, 3.5 points, shot 50% from the field, 11 points per game or 11 minutes per game in 32 games. But another returner that they have. But then they bring in JoJo Murphy. He's a guy that I'm high on, comes from the D2 ranks there at Chico State in California. He was a D2 All-American last year, averaged 20 points, almost 21 points, and shot 39% from the three. I think that should translate well here to the WCC, at least when they're playing the bottom half of the conference. Maybe he's going to be a little out-talented per se in the top half of the conference, but I think he'll be able to be successful against the bottom-tier teams. And then another guy, Austin Meyer, comes from Grand Canyon, and Brock Felder from Southern Utah. Also got a guy, Jun Seok Yu from Gonzaga, actually intra-conference transfer from Gonzaga. Clearly a guy on Gonzaga's team that was just getting over-recruited, and was like, all right, I'm sick of just sitting on the bench. So now he's going to be at Seattle and maybe get some minutes there. But yeah, it'll be an interesting year for Seattle. Definitely a step up in competition coming from the WAC to the WCC. However, with the bottom tier teams that are here in the WCC, I think it allows Seattle to not finish near the bottom. So I've got them kind of middle of the road.
All right. And the final team before the predictions, the Cougars of Washington State out of Pullman, Washington last season, 19-15, 8-10 in the West Coast Conference, tied for 6th for David Riley, jumping over from the Big Sky into the West Coast Conference, and then going to be potentially on the Pac-12. So they love playing a lot of guys. They don't just focus on a few pieces in ISO ball. They like to spread the floor as well, which fits well into their game. But they can shoot the ball. I think they definitely can. They're going to be able to spread the floor yet again, even with a different amount of pieces coming in. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. On paper, they were supposed to be a lot better last year, but I felt like they underperformed a ton. But I think talent-wise, they could kind of gel just a little bit. A couple bench pieces from last season could add some experience to the team and roster. But the pieces that you bring in are going to be vital. Transfer from Boise State, Emmanuel Ugbo, and then Ali Yalshoo from Texas Tech also. So could make an immediate impact. And then Jerome Morton from Morehead State. So yeah, lose a lot of pieces. Have to bring in a ton of different guys. You're going to continue doing that kind of motion style offense, and going to play a ton of guys versus just playing a few. So you made the Crown tournament last year. Congratulations. That's the Live Golf tournament for NCAA sports or college basketball. But yeah, I like Washington State. I think they could be competitive. They got talent, and they got to prove themselves before they take that next jump to the Pac-12 next season.
Yeah, I think they had high expectations, but when you lose Cedric Coward 6 games into the season with that shoulder injury that he experienced, I think that really hurt the Cougars there, and that's kind of where they really started to struggle. I think they would have been a lot better with him. Obviously, super talented kid, drafted 11th in the NBA by the Memphis Grizzlies here in the offseason. So I think if they would have had him for the full season, it would have been maybe a different story. I would have seen them competing there with San Francisco and Santa Clara. They're kind of at the top of the 3-4 of the conference last year. But yeah, interesting to see, this year, we always like to talk about size, and they bring in 7 players that are taller than 6'7". So something that Riley has kind of chosen to do was get a little bit taller and get a little bit more size this year. But definitely, I mean, all things considered, coming over from Eastern Washington, you finish 19-15. I know Cedric Coward came over and followed you, and then unfortunately had the injury, like I just had discussed. So that kind of hurt. But I feel like that might be a successful season. Maybe it's a little bit of a disappointment for what their expectations were. But to finish 19-15, 8-10, I think that's not a bad season, especially with the injuries that they had to deal with. But a couple guys you bring back, Tomas Threst-Tarson. He's a guy that averaged just over 20 minutes a game, 4.5 points, shot 42% from the 3. Indy Okafor is another guy, averaged about 13.5 minutes a game, 6 points a game, 63% from the field. Those are kind of the only 2 guys that are returning production from last year's team. So they're always going to, they're going to definitely have to rely on the portal for sure. And I think they brought in some good pieces. You'd mentioned the guy from Texas Tech. Another guy, Emmanuel Ugbo, comes in from Boise State. I think he can be good for them. Jerome Morton, another guy, averaged 10.5 points. He comes in from Morehead State. So I think they brought in some guys that could possibly, bring in the production and stuff that they were lacking last year. I think they got good depth. I think obviously their front court's going to be a little bit better than their back court. Curious to see what the guard play is going to look like for them. Not quite sure who they're going to play, who they're going to start, things of that nature. But, if they can figure out a couple solid guards, it could be possibly a decent season for Washington State. Again, it's going to be kind of difficult for them because, after this, they're moving to the Pac-12, and I don't see this roster at least being very successful in the Pac-12. I kind of, you look at the Pac-2, as I call them, they're pretty similar. I feel like they're going to kind of finish right next to each other here in the WCC, with Oregon State and Washington State kind of being maybe middle tier, middle of the pack. And, maybe finishing similar to what they did last year in that 8-10, 9-9, somewhere in that. Hopefully, maybe for their sake, they can finish above 500 there in the West Coast Conference, but definitely don't see them sniffing the top.
Yeah, they'll be competitive. That's the West Coast Conference preview. We're going to dive into our top 12, and then we'll go from there and start our P5 previews up. This is the West Coast Conference preview or Pump Fake Pod. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks everyone for tuning in the chat. Raymond, Redman, appreciate you guys for tuning in. I dropped the chat too, so appreciate you, man. I don't know, I'm teasing. Elliot as well. All right. You went first last night. I'll go first. For the West Coast, we go bottoms up here. 12th, Portland, the Pilots for me.
You sure? You sure?
Correct.
Okay. If that's what you want to do, I'm going to go Portland as well.
All right, Portland. Okay. 11th for me, Loyola Marymount.
You sure?
Yep.
Yep, I'm going Loyola Marymount as well. I almost put Loyola Marymount in the bottom and gave Portland a little bit of a chance, but decided to stick it.
I really don't want to do this, but I'm going to have to. I'm going Pepperdine here.
What? Why?
Fuck it. I'll go San Diego. I love Pepperdine too much. San Diego, number 9.
Good, I'm going Pepperdine. I didn't want to be 3 in a row with you.
Or 10 for San Diego, sorry.
10 Pepperdine.
9 for me will be Pepperdine.
9 for me is going to be San Diego.
8 for me is Santa Clara, the Broncos.
Ooh, I've got 8 for me is going to be Seattle.
Okay, 7 for me is Oregon State.
Damn, we're shaking it up. I like it. 7 for me is going to be Pacific.
6 for me is Pacific.
6 for me is Oregon State.
5th for me is Seattle.
5th for me is Washington State.
4th for me is Washington State.
Santa Clara is 4th for me.
Ooh. 3rd, San Francisco.
3rd, San Francisco.
And 2nd, St. Mary's. 1st, Gonzaga.
Same.
Yep, I think the front runners are pretty legitimate. Top 3 is pretty set in order.
Yep.
My top 12, Gonzaga, St. Mary's, San Francisco, Washington State, Seattle, Pacific, Oregon State, Santa Clara, Pepperdine, San Diego, Loyola Marymount, and Portland.
And in classic fashion, I like Pacific, so I'm going to switch it up. I'm putting Pacific at number 6, Oregon State at number 7. After looking at my list, divide those up a little bit. All right, so number 1 I have is Gonzaga, 2 St. Mary's, 3 San Francisco, 4 Santa Clara, 5 Washington State, 6 Pacific, 7 Oregon State, 8 Seattle, 9 San Diego, 10 Pepperdine, 11 Loyola Marymount, and 12 Portland.
All right. That is the West Coast preview. Appreciate everyone tuning in. Thanks for that. We'll be live tomorrow for the Big East Conference, doing our P5 previews, getting them underway. And then next week we'll do our futures episode as well. A couple futures episodes, and then we know the big one, November 2nd. Be sure to tune in for that betting episode. So appreciate all you guys in the chat tuning in. This is the West Coast tomorrow. Yes, Sana, thanks for tuning in. Big East tomorrow, P5 next week. We got ACC, Big 12, SEC, and Big 10 all next week. Yes, and the betting shows are going to be fire. This is the most I've been locked in and dialed in and knowing every player's name for this year. So what a grind it's been, and appreciate everyone tuning in on these previews.
Raymond, we're pretty much we're pretty similar on our picks there for the West Coast Conference. I was just looking at you, what you had entered. I think all we did was flip flop Washington State, Oregon State, and then flip flopped. What was it? That was it, wasn't it? Gonzaga, St. Mary's, San Francisco, Santa Clara, Oregon State. That flip flopped 6. Yep. 8. Yep. Oh, we flip flop Pepperdine and San Diego too. But damn, we're about the same.
All right.
It's like the third time, so we're fucked.
Brothers, cool. Yes. Great minds think alike. This is the Pump Fake Pod. Make sure to like and subscribe. Tune in. Follow us at Pump Fake Pod. Thanks, everyone. Basketball is upon us. Peace and love, everyone.